There's something few ever teach us. Peace does not lie in someone else's hands. It isn't in their words, their actions, or their attitude. If peace exists at all, it lives within. But modern society makes us forget that. We react like switches flipped on and off by other people's behavior. One comment sparks our anger. One broken promise leaves us disappointed. One misunderstanding is enough to shatter an entire relationship. Why? Because we've never been taught how to stay grounded in the chaos of daily life. The Stoic does not seek to control others. They learn to master themselves. They do not live to react, but to choose. And in that choice, they find freedom. This video isn't here to teach you to be cold, but to remind you of this simple truth. You alone hold the power to decide whether a tiny moment will ruin your entire day, or whether you'll stand like a stone in the storm. Begin that journey today. 1. Anger is a mirror, not a weapon. Anger is often misunderstood as a tool for defense, retaliation, or strength. But to the Stoic eye, anger isn't something to be used, but something to be observed. It's not a weapon pointed outward, but a mirror turned inward. When you feel angry because someone insulted you, broke a promise, or acted against your expectations, it doesn't necessarily prove they're wrong. It often reveals an unresolved belief or expectation within you. For instance, if a friend doesn't reply to your message and it upsets you, pause and ask, what inside me just got touched? Maybe it's the fear of being abandoned, the feeling of being disrespected, or an old wound of neglect you've never healed. A Stoic doesn't try to fix the friend, they turn inward and reflect. They understand that anger is the voice of a mind resisting reality, insisting this shouldn't have happened, while in fact, it already has. Anger is not just an alarm, it's a map to the unhealed corners of your psyche. It is neither enemy nor friend. It's a signal. And like all signals, you can choose to listen without being led. The Stoic doesn't suppress anger through denial, nor feed it with excuses. They observe, understand, and move through it. So the next time you feel anger rise, don't shout or strike back. Ask, what was I expecting that didn't happen? What pain inside me just got touched? The answers aren't for blame, but for healing. And once you see yourself more clearly through anger, you won't need it anymore. 2. Silence is not weakness, but self-mastery. In a world that rewards quick responses, sharp comebacks, and bold opinions, silence is often mistaken for passivity, surrender, or weakness. But to the Stoic, silence isn't retreat, it's a profound form of strength. It is the power of one who can restrain themselves, who knows that not everything deserves a reaction, and not every thought must be voiced immediately. We've all regretted words spoken in anger. A message sent too quickly, a cutting remark, a harsh sentence just to prove a point. In those moments, we may win over someone's silence, but we lose to ourselves. In contrast, we rarely regret staying silent, because silence, when it comes from clarity, doesn't diminish us. It creates space to better see ourselves and the situation. Silence isn't avoidance, it's intentional delay. It's time for emotions to settle, for thoughts to form unclouded by reflex. When you don't react right away, you give yourself the power to choose. To choose the right words, the right timing, and a tone that builds rather than breaks. That's the difference between shouting out of pride and speaking calmly to protect your boundaries. The Stoic knows that impulsive reaction is easy, but maintaining space between feeling and action is the challenge. Remaining silent when provoked isn't surrender, it's the sign of someone who has trained their inner discipline. They know that words can ignite or heal. And choosing when to speak is how we preserve our dignity, wisdom, and inner freedom. Silence, used rightly, doesn't make you invisible. It makes you solid, trustworthy, and unshakable. 3. Learn the difference between reaction and reflection. Reactions are instinctive. They come instantly, without filter. Someone says something offensive, you snap. Someone criticizes, you defend. A situation frustrates you, you slam the desk, scowl, complain. Reaction springs from unnamed pain, unseen fear, a bruised ego desperate for protection. It's a survival reflex. But the Stoic doesn't live by reflex, they live by reflection. They pause, observe, and choose their response with intention. Reflection begins with awareness. It asks, why did that bother me? Was that truly offensive, or am I sensitive because of something else? What do I really want from this situation? Quick satisfaction or a meaningful outcome? Reflection doesn't deny emotion, but it doesn't surrender to it either. It turns inward before turning outward. And in that silent space between stimulus and response, real strength is born. The Stoic doesn't take every harsh word as a personal attack. They consider the context, the emotions of the other, and most of all, they examine themselves. If a critique makes you angry, reflection asks, is there some truth in what was said? If someone ignores you, reflection asks, am I relying too much on their attention for my self-worth? These questions aren't for blame or submission. They help you understand what inside you still needs healing. When you react, you give away control. When you reflect, you reclaim it. Reaction creates chaos. Reflection creates clarity. Reaction is reflex. Reflection is choice. And in a world full of noise, the one who reflects is not only master of the moment, but master of themselves. That's where strength begins. 4. Smile at adversity. A quiet kind of strength. We often think of smiling as innocence, optimism, or even naivety. But in Stoic thought, a well-timed smile is the mark of a resilient soul. A smile isn't a way to escape the problem. It's how you declare that the problem will not take over your mind. When you can smile at what displeases you, you're saying to the world, I see how absurd this is, but I won't let it control me. The world keeps testing us. A rude comment, a disrespectful gesture, a last-minute failure, these things can leave us stressed, shaken, or steeped in anger. But the Stoic learns to see through a wider lens. They don't frame life around their own expectations. They know that injustice, mistakes, and disappointment are inevitable. And instead of resisting in rage, they choose to smile. Not because they don't feel the pain, but because they refuse to be ruled by it. A timely smile can dissolve tension, diffuse anger, and even shift an entire situation. It creates distance between the ego and reality. When you smile at criticism, you're not denying your feelings, you're declaring, I'm strong enough not to be moved by this. When you smile after a failure, you're quietly saying, I'm still learning and I'm not giving up. That smile doesn't boast, it carries a quiet confidence, the belief that peace does not depend on a perfect world. To smile at adversity is not to pretend there's no problem, it is to refuse being imprisoned by it. It's a quiet, steady, and lasting strength. The Stoic doesn't smile to distract, they smile to show they've risen above. And sometimes, a simple, well-timed smile is the deepest, most mature form of resistance. 5. Not everyone deserves your reaction. Each day, countless things demand your attention. Critical comment online, a stranger's disrespect, a co-worker's subtle jab, or even a random message from someone in your past. In the moment, all of it seems important, urgent, worthy of an immediate response. But if you react to everything, you'll have nothing left for what truly matters. The Stoic understands that attention is your most precious resource, and how you spend it shapes the peace or chaos within your mind. Not every comment requires a reply. Not every behavior deserves a defense, an explanation, or a confrontation. When you allow yourself to be pulled into every minor conflict, you become a slave to your environment. The Stoic reserves their energy for things more worthy: truth, values, reason, and inner peace. They don't stay silent out of fear, but because they know that sometimes not joining the fight is the highest form of victory. The real question isn't, can I respond, but is this worth losing my peace over? Every reaction is an investment of energy. Every time you get pulled into pettiness, you lose a bit of clarity from your day. The Stoic is not easily triggered because they have learned to distinguish between signals worth noticing and background noise. Choosing not to react doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care about greater things: personal growth, meaningful relationships, and a soul not worn down by trivialities. When you understand that not everyone deserves your reaction, you begin to build a sanctuary for yourself where calm is the priority, not the reward. And in this noisy world, the one who selects their responses wisely is the one who governs their inner life. 6. Calmness isn't inborn, it's trained. We often admire those who can stay calm in any situation. Someone who doesn't raise their voice in an argument, who doesn't throw their phone when provoked, who doesn't let a harsh comment ruin their entire day. It's easy to assume they were born that way, composed, cool, unaffected. But the truth is, calmness isn't a gift. It's a skill, forged through each choice not to react, every failure learned from, every quiet decision to try again. To the Stoic, calm is a discipline, not a trait. They don't wait for peace to come from outside. They build it within, little by little. When faced with attack, they don't ask, "Am I angry?" but "What else can I choose?" When plans fall apart, they don't complain. "Why me?" They face reality and remind themselves, "This is out of my control, but my response isn't." And then they breathe, they step back, and they choose clarity over impulse. Calm isn't built in the crisis itself, it's built in the quiet moments throughout the day. When you're stuck in traffic and don't curse. When you're waiting for someone to finish a task and don't show frustration. When you read a negative comment and remain neutral. These are quiet training sessions for the mind, the gym where self-mastery is built. This is how calm is formed, not flashy, but unshakable. The Stoic doesn't believe in, "I'm just hot-headed, I can't help it." They believe personality is shaped by habit, and habit can be changed by will. Every day, every time you choose to respond rather than react, you're laying the foundation for calm. And like any skill, the more you practice, the better you get. Calmness isn't luck granted to a few, it's a path open to anyone patient enough to walk it. 7. Don't write scripts in your head and get angry when others don't follow them. Humans have an unconscious habit. We write mental scripts and assign roles to others without telling them. We expect friends to always understand us, lovers to always be sensitive, co-workers to always be fair, and our boss to always be reasonable. These expectations aren't wrong, but the mistake is forgetting that they're our scripts, not theirs. When others don't follow the roles we gave them, we don't just feel disappointed, we feel betrayed, hurt, and let down, even though they never agreed to act the way we imagined. The Stoic calls this a confusion between what we control and what we don't. We can choose how we live, act, and love, but we cannot make others respond the same way. When we write scripts in our minds and don't share them, we invite disappointment, and the worst part is we blame them when the real playwright is us. Try thinking of it this way. If you believe anyone who loves me should always be on time, then just one late arrival will feel like disrespect. But if you realize punctuality is my value, not necessarily theirs, you'll have more space for conversation instead of judgment. The Stoic doesn't abandon expectations, but they place them on their own actions, not on others' behavior. The sooner you recognize that you're writing roles for people while ignoring their freedom, the sooner your pain lessens. Because no one was born to perform in your private screenplay. Everyone has their own freedom, their own rhythm, their own view. And your freedom begins when you let others have theirs. Then, instead of being upset that someone didn't play their part, you'll learn to listen, to understand, and to adjust. And from that flexibility, peace begins to grow. 8. Stop carrying the past. Like a torn backpack. Some things happened long ago, yet we carry them as if they occurred this morning. An insult that was never apologized for. A breakup with no closure. A betrayal that left a quiet scar we keep poking. We cling to these memories like a torn backpack, heavy, ragged, and no longer useful. The Stoic doesn't tell us to forget the past, but reminds us we don't have to anchor our lives to it. What's happened doesn't need to be relived daily. Not every pain needs to be preserved, just to remember and avoid it. Some wounds must be understood, then set down so life can move forward. Dragging the past doesn't make you stronger. It just makes the road ahead harder. The person who hurt you may have forgotten already. They're living a different life now, scrolling social media, sipping coffee, laughing while you remain stuck in a moment that has long passed. The hard truth is, they're no longer thinking about it. But you're letting it live again every day in your mind. So you're not hurt just once, but hundreds of times, each time that memory returns. The Stoic believes forgiveness is not a pardon for the wrongdoer, but a release for yourself. Forgiveness is the declaration, I choose not to let this control me anymore. You don't have to forget. You just have to stop feeding it. You don't have to pretend you're fine. You just need to stop bleeding every time someone mentions the past. Forgiveness is a rational act, not an emotional one. And when you finally set down that torn backpack, you'll feel lighter, breathe easier, and walk forward with both hands free to hold something new. Letting go of the past is not defeat. It's a quiet triumph. It's the declaration, I will no longer be dragged backward. And sometimes, just by setting something down, you move forward a long way. 9. Master yourself, not others. There's a common mistake many of us make, thinking that if we speak cleverly enough, clearly enough, sincerely enough, others will change. But the truth is, you can speak perfectly, act kindly, and be endlessly patient, and still, nothing changes. Not because you're not good enough, but because you cannot control another person's inner journey. You don't control how they think, feel, or respond. The Stoic sees this clearly and reminds us, instead of trying to change others, focus on how you show up in your own life. When you strain to manage someone else's emotions, choices, or behavior, you not only exhaust yourself, you invite disappointment. You hand over control of your own emotional state to something beyond your grasp. Worse still, you lose your own freedom. Mastery of self doesn't mean detachment or indifference. It is the ability to manage your thoughts, reactions, and actions, no matter how chaotic the outside world may be. The Stoic doesn't manipulate or preach. They live as a mirror. They know that the most powerful way to influence others is through consistent and upright behavior. They don't force change, they create space for others to see themselves. They don't demand others behave well in order to feel at peace. Instead, they build an inner sanctuary that no one can enter unless invited. And the moment you stop trying to control others, you return to what truly matters, mastering yourself. You learn to take full responsibility for what you think, say, and do. You stop living in the mindset of, "I'll be happy if they change," and begin living in the clarity of, "I'm okay because I govern myself." That's not surrender, it's wisdom distilled through experience. And from that, you step into a deeper kind of freedom, not the freedom to control others, but the freedom of not being controlled by them. 10. Be careful with the story you tell yourself. It's not what happens that hurts us. It's how we interpret what happens. A cold glance might simply be fatigue, but if you believe that person hates you, rejection will hit instantly. An unanswered message might be due to busyness, but if you assume you're being ignored, your heart will ache from a script no one confirmed. That's the power of the story in your head. It doesn't need to be true, just familiar enough for you to believe. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your whole life acting in mental films you wrote, directed, and starred in without ever questioning the plot. The Stoic understands that the outer world can't hurt us without permission from the inner one. When something upsets you, their first question isn't, "Who did this?" but "What meaning did I assign to this?" They don't trust raw emotions, they trust the meaning that gives rise to those emotions. If you believe every silence is rejection, every criticism is an attack, every denial is a dismissal of your worth, you'll live in a hostile world, even when no one is truly against you. That's why the Stoic builds a crucial habit. Pause and examine the story you're telling yourself. Is this fact or assumption? What proof do I have for what I believe? Is there a gentler, more objective explanation? These questions aren't to deny your feelings, but to clarify your thinking. Because when you change the story, you don't just change how you feel, you change how you act and how you connect with the world. Not everyone wants to hurt you. Not everything is a message meant for you. But if you never learn to question your own thoughts, you'll forever live in defense mode. And that mode will cost you real connections, real growth, and above all, the peace already within you. Be careful with the story you tell yourself, because it's not the world that's wounding you, but your belief in a distorted version of it, and that's what must be healed. 11. You are not the center of every story. The human mind has a familiar reflex. It centers everything around itself. When someone doesn't reply, you assume you did something wrong. When someone doesn't smile, you assume they dislike you. When a coworker turns distant, you feel rejected, but most of the time, none of it is about you. They might be tired, worried about something personal, or simply lost in their own world. But when you place yourself at the center of every situation, you don't just misread the moment, you bring upon yourself unnecessary sorrow. The Stoic sees the limits of ego. They understand that everyone is the center of their own world, not yours. They don't rush to interpret others through their own lens, but step back and remind themselves, I don't know what's going on inside them, and I don't need to invent a narrative. When you let go of being the center of the universe, you also let go of the burden to control every reaction, every outcome, every emotion others show you. Instead of thinking they're ignoring me, the Stoic thinks something might be going on with them that I don't know. Instead of asking, why are they doing this to me? They ask, what might this say about their state, not necessarily about me? In this way, they don't let their emotions dangle from other people's behavior. They preserve their inner stability because they don't tie their self-worth to the ever-changing expressions of the outside world. And when you stop seeing yourself as the center, you begin to see others with more ease. You're less angry, less judgmental, less expectant. You begin to understand that everyone is wrestling with their own story, and sometimes their behavior isn't directed at you, but echoes from somewhere deep within them. Real freedom begins when you stop attaching yourself to every reaction, when you stop assuming it's all about you. That's when you not only understand others better, but create a peaceful space for yourself. 12. Anger is not strength. It's a burden. When you're angry, you feel stronger, your voice louder, your heart pounding, your arguments sharper, your ego inflated. Anger creates the illusion that you're in control, that you're reclaiming power, that you're refusing to be disrespected. But what follows the outburst? A heavy silence, doubtful looks, damage that can't be undone, and a quiet question. Did I go too far? The Stoic understands that while anger may look like power, it's actually a weight that drags the spirit down. Anger often doesn't come from the present, but from old wounds reopened. A careless word hits a scar that hasn't healed. A small gesture stirs memories of betrayal. A letdown reminds you of being abandoned, and then you erupt. But the danger is when anger rises, reason retreats. In that storm, you no longer hear others, you only hear your own echo. You stop conversing and start unloading. And more often than not, regret follows after the wave recedes, leaving behind damage, distance, or long silence. The Stoic doesn't deny emotions, they simply refuse to be ruled by them. They train the skill of pausing before a word becomes a wound, before a reaction fractures a bond. They understand that strength isn't how loud you can shout, but how calm you can remain. Not everyone can do this, but with practice one learns. Anger must be observed, not unleashed. Remember, anger doesn't make you stronger, it only makes you more chaotic. True strength is the ability to harness that energy and turn it into something of value, to speak firmly but kindly, to set boundaries without yelling, to choose silence instead of striking back. When you can do that, you protect not only your own dignity but also the peace of those around you, and that is the kind of strength no one can take from you. 13. You don't have to react to everything you see. In today's world, where every piece of information, behavior, and speech is broadcast openly and instantly, it's easy to feel like you must always respond. A negative comment, a sarcastic post, a dramatic story on social media all seem to invite your participation. And if you're not careful, you'll get swept into a cycle of frustration, arguments, defensiveness, and even loss of control. But the Stoic understands, not everything that happens requires your reaction. Silence isn't weakness, it's a wise selection of where your mental energy belongs. Each time you react, you spend a portion of your peace. Every hasty reply is a missed chance to keep a clear head. The Stoic doesn't allow themselves to become a switch others can flip at will. They don't react just because someone provoked them. They first ask, is this worth it? Does it really concern me? If I let this pass, what do I actually lose? And most of the time the answer is nothing. Nothing lost, only calm preserved. Not reacting doesn't mean avoiding or ignoring. It's a deliberate choice. You can witness foolishness and still remain patient. You can read something false without rushing to correct it. You can see someone behave poorly and still choose not to retaliate. That doesn't make you weak. On the contrary, it shows you've trained yourself to prioritize peace over the need to be right. The world is loud. If you react to everything you see, you'll have no space left for clarity, wisdom, or compassion. The Stoic chooses selective response as a form of energy conservation. They understand that silence is sometimes the loudest voice, and in many situations, not reacting is the best reaction because it says, "I won't let this pull me away from my center." That is the height of self-mastery. 14. Gratitude, the antidote to anger. Anger erupts when we feel insulted, wronged, or deprived of something we believe we deserve. It comes from a sense of lack, a lack of respect, fairness, attention, or affection. But there's another emotion, equally powerful, that can dissolve anger naturally: gratitude. When you truly feel grateful, it is impossible to feel angry at the same time. The two cannot coexist in the same moment. One contracts, the other expands. That's why gratitude becomes a quiet yet potent antidote to rage. The Stoic doesn't use gratitude to sugarcoat reality. They don't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. They acknowledge difficulty, yet remain rational enough to see what is still present and still worthy of appreciation. When insulted, they recall the inner freedom they still possess. When they fail, they're grateful that the lesson came early. When hurt by someone, they're thankful for the chance to practice endurance. Gratitude broadens your perspective. It pulls you out of the center of your anger and shows you the bigger picture. It doesn't erase the problem, but it keeps it from overpowering you. And sometimes, all it takes is a pause, a breath, and a list of 3 things you're grateful for in that moment for the anger to begin fading. Not because it vanished, but because you chose to rise above it. That is the strength of gratitude, quiet, profound, and liberating. 15. Don't react. Rewrite the script. Most of our suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from how we react to them. A situation can affect 2 people completely differently. One erupts in anger, the other sighs and moves on. The difference isn't in the event, but in the internal script each one is living by. The one who reacts immediately follows emotion and habit. The one who pauses, observes, and rewrites the script is the one truly in control. The Stoic practices questioning the story the mind is creating. I was insulted. They meant to hurt me. This is unfair. These thoughts are often only part of the truth, but their impact is enormous if we don't catch them. When you react, you continue playing an old role. The victim, the wounded, the one who must prove something. But you can stop and choose a new role, the one who knows their worth and doesn't need the world to conform to feel dignified. Rewriting the script isn't denial. It's intentional reinterpretation. The Stoic asks, what's another way to view this? If I were calmer, what would I say? What choice would make me proud when this is over? These questions create space for response, not reaction. And each time you rewrite a mental script, you don't just change your present behavior, you change how you walk through life. With more reason, with more freedom, with more dignity. This is how the Stoic lives quietly but deliberately, not pulled along but leading the way. I used to think staying calm was for the weak, that true strength meant reacting fast and hitting back hard. But as I grew older and faced more of life, I came to see a timely silence, a quiet frown, or walking away without needing to win. That's the mark of someone who's truly grown. What I've learned from Stoicism hasn't made me cold. It's made me steadier in the face of what I cannot control. I've come to understand that anger doesn't prove you're right. Yelling doesn't confirm your worth, and not every situation demands a response. Every time I choose to step back, I find myself closer to inner freedom, And over time, I no longer try to control others. I simply try to master myself, little by little, each day. If this message resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Thank you for taking the time to listen. May you always remain calm, even when the world doesn't go your way. See you in the next video.